Dr. Patrick McCullough is with the Crop and Soil Sciences Department here at UGA, and his responsibilities include turfgrass management. Reed scientist, he's a reed scientist for us. Patrick, please go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this presentation. My update is on the status of a herbicide in the turfgrass industry called Ronstar, something that I talked about last year, but this is one of the biggest changes that we're seeing as far as weed control tools and programs that could affect end users in the golf course industry, sports turf, and sod farms as well. The EPA has ruled on restricting Ronstar use for the future uses in turfgrass. This will take place in July 1st of 2024. That's at least the scheduled date where we will see label changes for pre-emergence use of Ronstar applications in turf management. There's concerns about human exposure to Ronstar after applications, and the EPA felt that there was enough data there to support these label changes and restrictions on how we use Ronstar for pre-emergence control of weeds in turf. Some of these changes are going to include for golf courses things like the retreatment intervals, which will be 60 days. We will also have area restrictions of 30% of the total acreage on golf courses that can be treated. So these are some fairly significant restrictions that we're seeing with oxadiazone-containing products. For sod farms, retreatment intervals will be 60 days. There will also be restrictions based on the formulations that are being applied and the total amount that you can use per acre per year. One of the potential limitations here for sports fields and sod growers is the retreatment interval of 60 days. One of the tricks of the trade for many end users has been to apply Ronstar with split applications in 2 or 3 weeks to get all the total rate applied in a short time span. That has now been changed to 60 days so that they can limit how much is going out and how much exposure the end user and people who come into contact with those areas could possibly face with those applications. So with Ronstar specifically, this is the Cadillac pre-emergent herbicide for goosegrass control. Its benefits include things like turfgrass safety, the ability to sprig into or sod into treated areas, especially Bermuda grass and other warm season grasses, zoysia grass, St. Augustine grass. The soil residual activity is also very long for a pre-emergence control for weeds like goosegrass. At certain rates, we can get about 120 days of residual pre-emergence control. And for those of you who are working in residential only, some of these issues may not impact your weed management strategies. However, this could be an opportunity to just have an appreciation of the need to potentially adjust or adapt to restrictions on herbicide use going forward and some of the alternative herbicides that we have to replace things like Ronstar in weed control programs. Some of the other options that we can use to help supplement pre-emergent programs that were based on Ronstar use for weeds like goosegrass control in warm season turf include herbicides like Tower, products like Pennant Magnum. These are very good pre-emergent herbicides that have good safety. How they compare with Ronstar is they have different modes of action. They have good efficacy for weeds like crabgrass and goosegrass, spurge and kalinga. Tower is one of the better pre-emergent herbicides for controlling weeds like doveweed and some of the summer annual broadleaf weeds. One of the biggest limitations that we have when we lose a herbicide like Ronstar is that the replacement products are going to have some limitations, such as residual activity and the need to come back with reapplications in about a 30 to 45 day interval for products like Tower and Pennant Magnum. So much shorter residual activity, But like Ronstar, we can use Tower, we can use Pennant Magnum at reduced rates during turfgrass establishment from sprigs. Just to look at some of the work we did in Tifton on some of the Ultradorf Bermuda grasses that were treated with Tower and Pennant Magnum with Ronstar. And just comparing efficacy, we can still get very good control of weeds like Kalinga, goosegrass, and spurge with things like Tower and Pennant in rotation or to replace products like Ronstar if we cannot use them in our management program with those new restrictions. Tower is also found in a combination product called Freehand. This is a Tower pendimethalin combination that can be used for crabgrass and goosegrass control. This could be a potential Ronstar replacement or a product that could be used in rotation where Ronstar could not be used. We do get good crabgrass control with the pendimethalin in the mix, and the Tower component is controlling weeds like spurge, Kalinga, and giving us a little bit better goosegrass control compared to just the pendimethalin by itself. We do have some issues with these chemistries, the Pennants and the Towers freehand. If we overlap on warm season grasses in cool weather, there is some turfgrass injury potential there, similar to Ronstar, but we are seeing that low temperature uses on green warm season grasses that have not gone into dormancy. We can get some off coloring with products like Tower that are timed for late fall applications for POA annual control or for controlling winter annual broadleaf weeds. So some of the potential limitations could be turfgrass safety at various times of year with those pre-emergent herbicides. We have a new product that will be launched later this year called Stay Guard. This is a granular formulation of flumioxazin, which has been previously used in the turf industry as SureGuard. SureGuard is a sprayable formulation, so it has to be dissolved and then sprayed out for a broadcast application. Stay Guard is a spreadable formulation that will be sold on a fertilizer carrier. Stay Guard can be used on actively growing warm season grasses, unlike SureGuard, which has got to be used on dormant turf grasses. And this is because it has the same mode of action as Ronstar. It's a chlorophyll synthesis inhibitor, group 14 herbicide family. The safety on Bermuda grass is very good. It has some potential to use during turfgrass establishment, similar to Ronstar, so we can sprig and sod into a Stay Guard treated area. But the soil residual is much shorter than Ronstar. So this is not a true Ronstar replacement, but this is a newer chemistry for the turf industry in a spreadable formulation that has about 60 days of pre-emergence activity for weeds like crab and goosegrass control. And much like Ronstar, if we time it before the germination, we can get good residual pre-emergence control of summer annual grassy weeds. Flumioxazin or Stay Guard has better efficacy than Ronstar for broadleaf weeds, in particular spurge and some of those other summer annual broadleaf weeds that will begin to emerge when we are targeting goosegrass control in some of those weed control strategies. Just looking at goosegrass control with SureGuard against Ronstar, this is some old data that just kind of shows the efficacy of single and sequential applications of these products for goosegrass control. SureGuard with one application is just not lasting as long as Ronstar for controlling goose, but the two applications can help extend residual control for about 3 or 4 months after applications. Some of the other Ronstar alternatives include things like Spectacle Flow. Spectacle is one of the more popular pre-emergent herbicides for POA annual control in warm season grasses. Spectacle does have very good activity for goosegrass control, which is on par with Ronstar. However, the limitations with Spectacle compared to Ronstar include things like turfgrass safety and turfgrass recovery from stresses. Spectacle, because of its mode of action, will prune roots on shallow-rooted turf grasses. So if you're getting a lot of winter stress or traffic, or if there's potential diseases or winter kill, Spectacle is going to have potential to fight the recovery of turf grasses from that stress, whereas Ronstar, because of its mode of action, is not going to inhibit lateral rooting of Bermuda grass and other warm season grasses. So we do have some concern about safety as a limitation to using Spectacle in place of Ronstar in weed management programs. And then Tribute Total, that's a post-emergent herbicide, but it has some residual activity for pre-emergence goosegrass control, and it has potential there to kind of bridge the gap between pre-emergence applications if goosegrass is an issue in the spring and summertime. So just looking at Spectacle here, this is just showing the potential for its use to control annual bluegrass or POA in a barricade-resistant turf grass. It does have a different mode of action than the Group 3s and a different mode of action than Ronstar. Looking at Tribute Total, it can be used as a pre-emergence, or if you're catching weeds like crab and goosegrass at an early growth stage, there is potential there to knock down some of those seedling weeds and also have some pre-emergent activity where you could get maybe 6 weeks of pre-emergence control to get you to the next pre-emergent application of a herbicide like Spectacle or a Ronstar later in the year. So Tribute Total, because it will last in the soil, can give you preventative control of annual weeds like goosegrass, like annual bluegrass. But after 8 weeks, there's potential for the efficacy to decline in the soil, and you'll have to come in with something else to extend residual control. One of the concerns that we do have with Spectacle is the potential for it to leach just a few inches in the soil profile down to the turfgrass root system. We have to go with reduced rates of Spectacle in sand-based soils like you see here on these drain lines. Those are sand-capped areas where Spectacle was applied. We're seeing good safety on the turf, but where we have those drain lines, the Spectacle was able to move down to the root system, and you see that type of discoloration during the winter, which can be concerning for turfgrass quality and turfgrass aesthetics. So Spectacle does have potential to move. It's best to apply Spectacle at reduced rates, such as 2 to 3 ounces per acre in sandy soils with low organic matter, and try to avoid using Spectacle prior to heavy rainfall because the product can move several feet, especially in saturated soils. So extra caution is needed with Spectacle in those environments. So going back to weed management programs, for those of you who are managing sports fields, non-residential turf, golf courses, or sod farms, and a herbicide like Ronstar has been one of your major tools to control problem weeds, we can replace Ronstar if we need to with some of the other chemistries that we have available in turf management. But we have to use these in a strategic fashion. We need to make application timing critical, and we have to consider some of the other options if Ronstar could not be used in those in those areas. So here's just a hypothetical program. If we don't have Ronstar, we could start off with something like Dimension for early crabgrass control. That will get us to about April, where we can use something like Spectacle Flow at 3 to 6 ounces per acre to catch the initial flush of goosegrass that would start to emerge in central Georgia, usually around early to mid-May. Then come in with a Tower or a Pennant Magnum. This will be timed when it's going to be most effective for some of the hard-to-control weeds like doveweed or spurge, and also pick up some of the goosegrass activity where we cannot use Ronstar. Then by late fall or fall, coming in with a barricade just to extend residual control, and then use Tribute Total if it's needed in areas that are prone to goosegrass infestations. Barricade is definitely not a standalone herbicide for goosegrass control anymore for us in the South. And typically we see erratic levels of control with goosegrass if we are leaning on barricade for pre-emergence applications. And then by fall, sometime around October, November, coming in with a POA annual program with combinations with pre and post emergence treatments can help us with resistance management and get us through the peak flush of germination of POA that starts to occur in mid to late November. And then in between, spot spraying, hand weeding, those all need to be part of a program, making adjustments with cultural practices as well to enhance turfgrass competition, all need to be part of a comprehensive integrated pest management program for weed control. And, as we start to get restrictions and we start to lose some of the more traditional chemistries like Ronstar with some of the recent EPA restrictions, this is a chance and an opportunity to kind of revisit weed management programs and strategies, looking at things like resistance management. And this is an opportunity for us to rotate to some of the chemistries that we may not have been using in the past that can help us get more effective control of problem weeds that could be developing because of resistance or that we are selecting for because we've leaned on some of those products like Ronstar for many years. And using some of these other chemistries could help replace Ronstar, but also improve total weed control as well in turf management programs. With that, Shimat, I will wrap up my section here and hand it off to Alfredo.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I would just say if you have questions on Patrick's talk or, later on Alfredo and on mine, please use this Q&A button here and you can type your question. Dr. Alfredo Martinez is the next speaker. He's a professor and extension plant pathologist with the UGA, and his responsibility is also in Turfgrass. Alfredo, please go ahead.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Can you see the presentation, Shimat?
Yes, I can see that. And I can hear you well as well.
All right, thank you everyone for being here with us today. I will just go ahead and do a few remarks on turf diseases because for us, in terms of disease in turfgrass, fall is very important in several diseases. Foliar, crown diseases, and root diseases. And in many cases, here in the Griffin area, warm season grasses, most of them are pretty much dormant or semi-dormant, but south of us, it can maybe still be a little bit of greening up, greening. And but still, I just checked the 2-inch soil temperatures, and today may be a little bit of a misrepresentation because we are pretty much at 69 or so degrees, but a 2-inch is still like 62 degrees. So for things like Rhizoctonia and spin dead spot, this is probably the perfect timing for applying a fungicide. So I will emphasize the fall as part of being very important in order to get control of diseases that are really going to manifest themselves in springtime. And in many cases, that is already too late to do anything in terms of application of fungicides and so on. But you thought that you were done in several things, disease, its prevention, disease management is a key on that. And remember, winter is coming. So all these weather patterns are very important. We just had a little bit of rain that came through, and we're also by Monday or so another round of wet weather, which can directly impact on disease development due to the factors that are there. So fall is the time to implement preventative measures for dollar spot, for bipolar leaf spot, for Rhizoctonia large patch, and spin the spot among those. But in Georgia or in the Southeast, this is probably the most important diseases at this time that we need to be addressing all that. And again, a good coming up into winter will leave us also a better rebound in the springtime and a good green up. For those managing social grass, maybe it's still a little bit of time to do some more management strategies than, for example, Bermuda grass or others. The one people are doing some centipede, that may be a good time to implement also some management strategies on these diseases. But before to go into that, I also get what is the recent from last year to this year. If somebody saw that, we have several fungicides that are very interesting in the terms of what actually active ingredients. Here's a list of those. We have Serrata, which is the active ingredient is picarbutyrox. That it's a Pythium product that just came out. It's on a group called UGNO. We still don't know what in what group, and that will lead to the resistance group or not. But the important thing is that there's other alternatives for Pythium. So if you have been diagnosed either in a green or a field or many different scenarios with Pythium blight, Pythium root rot, Pythium dysfunction, Pythium some others, then Serrata is a good option. Pretty much it's basically on many different settings. Has very little restriction on that, so check the label for that. But it's a very widely used or that can be used in several areas. Calida, that's a combination of SDHI product, which is fluindapyr, and flutriafol, which is a DMI. And it targets a lot of different diseases, from leaf spot to crown diseases and spring dead spot. Also very recent. This is a good combination of the succinate dehydrogenase inhibitors, and therefore it's there for that. And also it has a lot of different settings of applications. Then Sicor, it's a DMI, it's prothioconazole. This is a new product on turf, but very or kind of old chemistry regarding to all in other crops, with a few improvements for turf. But the active ingredient is prothioconazole, which we have used in many other crops. Again, it has a very large area target, a pathogen: dollar spot, bipolar leaf spot, take-all root rot, Rhizoctonia, faded ring, anthracnose, and spring dead spot, among others. Also, with the only thing is that this one mostly regulated for golf courses, if I remember correctly. Resilia, this one is interesting because it's a combination of several products, an SDHI, flopyram, a DMI, and propamocarb, which is a carbamate that has been used in the past for Pythium products. For Pythium, so this one is targeting a whole complex of root diseases. So that's the novelty of this application. That's something that is available, in which you say send the sample or and have maybe a co-infection, or you don't know exactly what's going on. Pythium is in the label, take-all root rot, spring dead spot, faded ring, but all root diseases. So that's a good product to look into it for this. Also golf course scenarios. Acernity, that's a SDHI, which is the benzovindiflupyr plus the phenoconazole, also a combination of the SDHI and a DMI, and it has pretty much but this one targets a little bit more all foliar diseases like dollar spot and bipolar leaf spot, and crown diseases like Rhizoctonia, and of course root diseases like spring dead spot. Also in golf course scenarios. Posterity XT and Posterity Forte. We had a Posterity, which was the SDHI. Well, now the label, and you kind of have to be careful in here about which one are you using: Posterity XT, or Posterity Forte, because that's Posterity XT and Forte have the same active ingredients, just a little bit different amounts of that particular ingredient. But it's basically a combination of the three major groups: SDHI, the strobilurins, and the DMI. also golf course scenarios. And Cartis, this particular product had been working for a long, long time, and now that one is incorrect. This is BASF. Boscalid plus chlorothalonil is a SDHI, and the chlorothalonil chloronides group, and has a very wide range of foliar and root diseases on that. It's for BASF. So it's a lot of that going on. So those are the newest products that we have recently. And at the end, if I have time, I can get you some. We're going to go to those others that are now also available. Just to give a brief overview, again, leaf spots, and then again, dollar spot and the polite leaf spot are very unique. The only thing that we're working right now in dollar spot, know about the symptoms we have seen with those, is that we are working now. It used to be one kind of encompassed into one species of the fungus that lives in the thatch and in the soil. And now we have several species that, and that has a little bit of influence in how we manage those. Some that are really more towards the cool season grasses like Jacksoni, Claridia jacksoni, and more towards the warm season grasses, which is Claridia montethiana. I know for us as turfgrass managers, this may be a little bit too basic, but that later on is going to have an impact on how we set different things to different species, either the cool season or the warm season grasses. We have seen over and over again, it's a low fertility disease. If you have dollar spot, something is going on with your fertility, especially low in nitrogen or low in potassium levels. So check accordingly. And also the moisture on leaves. And when we have that moisture, it's very important to go and do that. Actually, to me, is one of the most important factors, the humidity, because sometimes the fertility can be marginal and all that, but that moisture on leaves is very important. Just to remember that fungicides in dollar spot, we have that in the several publications, but really the take home is that the SDHI products and the DMIs, triazoles, things like that, things like the one that we just saw about of the SDHIs plus some azoles, propiconazole, and so on, are very, very efficacious. Iprodion also is very efficacious. The only thing that is not as good in dollar spot, and you may be wasting time and money, is if you use strobilurin product on dollar spot. They do have, strobilurin is a little bit of containment and all that, but really is for practical purposes is not as they are not as efficacious. But we have complete lists of that in dollar spot. And bipolar leaf spot, another leaf spot that is very, very very important at this time of the year. What I've mentioned failed to mention in dollar spot is going to go to every single species that you have. Soja, Bermuda, Paspalum, cool season grasses, banggrass, all of them. In bipolar leaf spot really is very unique to Bermuda grass. We have seen it, and maybe a little bit different. Bipolaris is the name of the fungus that may be on seashore Paspalum. But for all practical purposes, bipolaris leaf spot on Bermuda grass 90% of the time, and or more than that. So it's very unique to that. And, for example, if you're managing a grass that you oversee, maybe a sport field, things like that, that may be also something that it will go or take advantage on the cool season too. But that particular system, Bermuda plus that receding, or Bermuda by itself. And there is a different, and I put the symptoms because it can be a little bit confusing at the beginning. So that's a part of that. It's all over the place, very dark looking lesions on the leaves. So be aware of that, and be proactive in looking at those things. And if you have a county agent nearby or things like that, it would be good to send a sample for that part and get a confirmation. But this is important. Potassium levels almost are kind of one-to-one relationship with increasing the bipolarity infection. So low potassium levels and drive the disease. And also, again, humidity and that. And I put this one slide here because it's important. This forms a lot of spores. So the spores can be moved easily by machinery, feet, running around, things like that. So it's important to maintain that. So if you have an area, for example, that you have more evidence of that the disease, probably mow those areas last. Iprodion, vinclozolin, mancozeb are very efficacious. The strobylurins in particular are very efficacious in controlling the disease. And we have found evidence also that some of the SDHIs are effective. But again, iprodion, mancozeb, or the strobylurins are good for that particular disease. Rhizoctonia and the crown diseases we have seen, we're going to see, or you already have a part of that, especially if you manage a large pad or social grass. That's a disease that is going to come, especially probably a month ago. It was the perfect, but a time like we have here in Griffin now with 72 or 70 degrees and 50s on upper 50s in the nighttime temperatures, this is kind of the right environment for that particular disease. The symptoms are showing in here. You see, most of you have seen it, deal with it, and so on. Areas where you can have seen more water collecting and so on, that's important for that. Looking at the first and having those, if there's anything going on that part. One thing that I would like to point to your attention, well, I see a patch, and I don't know if it's or not. The rhizoctonia is a crown disease. So roots are almost intact, or maybe a little bit of discoloration and things like that. But it's very different from a spring dead spot and some others that hopefully we can able to see. So that's one of the things also, that it does not going to kill totally the area. It has some of the stolons and so on. If you have spring dead spot, it's going to die. Fertility, humidity, and thatch. And I want to emphasize thatch. That's the spore, the mycelium lives down in those areas, the thatch. So that's very important part of that. Maybe collecting the clippings, power raking, some dethatching procedures. Of course, in golf courses, you have guys that have different things to do that. Very cutting, core radiation, things like that. It's important for rhizoctonia. What I seen, for example, in rhizoctonia Z, causing of this one, in which you have area next to each other where you have removed the thatch, and another area that has not. You have one that has rhizoc and the other one that has not. So very important thatch management. All the strobylurins are very important, very good in containing, such as also the demethylators and the DMIs, and several of those. So, but this is the time to do it. You may be a little bit late, maybe you're at the time, depending where you are, but this is probably the last chance to do something. If not, in spring, they're going to come back with a big revenge. Just wanted to get quickly in the spring dead spot. I don't know if I have a couple of minutes, Shimat, but this is the time to do it, because this is one of the diseases that they show up in the springtime. And by the time we do anything, it's already too late. And it can be very, very damaging. This is on Bermuda grass only, or mostly. We have seen a couple in social grass, but 95% of the time is in Bermuda grass. And in this one, the roots are done. One important factor is that, because the infection happens right now, and then if we have a hard winter, that's when it kills the grass. So if you have a patch in the springtime in which it never greened up, that probably is spring dead spot. If it greened up and then die in the springtime, is not spring dead spot. That's one of the things that do all that. But and we have several, and now more and more fungicides for spring dead spot, and but overall, the strobylurins, the SDHIs, and most importantly, the DMIs, the azoles are very, very efficacious in controlling the disease. But the timing, it's pretty much key for that. And this is the time to do it in a little bit lower temperatures than from large patch, maybe soil temperatures 2 inches on the 50s. That will be something to look into. And that's pretty much all that I have. If you have questions, please free to reach out to me or any of us for this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alfredo. I really appreciate that. So if you have any questions, just type in the Q&A, and I will do a short presentation on insect update, and we'll go through the questions. Okay, so let me introduce myself. My name is Shimat Joseph, and I am an associate professor with the Department of Entomology. Okay, I am also located in Griffin campus, and as Patrick and Alfredo. So what I'm trying to do today is just to go over quickly on some of the questions, some of the calls that I received this year concerning insect pest issues in Turfgrass. Before I do that, I just want to let you know there is a website that we are developing on, and that based, that you can get all the important biological information on major pests that we have in Georgia. So that's a QR code for that, and that's a website. There's something there for you if you want to read on. Anyway, let me just start with the Bermuda grass mite. This is one pest that I got questions this year. So this is a idiophile mite. It's a very tiny mite. It's very difficult to see with your naked eye. So you need a microscope to see it. It's not the same as the spider mites. Spider mites, you can see it as they move on the grass blade or plants, but this is not the case here. So you need a microscope to see it. This is under the microscope. You can see as big they are. So they are very tiny. These mites basically, suck the plant juice. That's basically the photosynthetics, whatever the leaves, produce, and basically that's what they feed on, the sugars and things like that. And their numbers go crazy when the conditions are favorable. Okay, so what really happens with this is you start seeing this kind of with just wound symptoms toward the terminal end of the grass. That's very common with kind of a virus symptom. But in this case, there is no virus involved. It's basically due to their feeding. So when they feed, they might be injecting some sort of saliva, like some kind of enzymes. That basically triggers this production of this shorter internode and shorter space between leaves. So all look like bungee topped kind of. It looks very, very much like a witch's broom symptom. So you will see extensive tillering in this case, as you can see in this figure, and the space between leaves shortens up. And if that persists for a longer period, you start seeing thinning in the grass. You're like space developing there. So what we have seen where these problems are mostly where there are some kind of stress in the grass. So if there is any sort of a stress, can be mostly related to water. So water stress, moisture stress, that's where you start seeing like a patch that you see in the turfgrass. But this picture, you can see this is happening in a bunker, in a golf course. That's obviously one side that's highly in stress, lack of water, whatever that means. So this can happen on a plain grass, in a plain level field too. So we have seen some pockets where, the water is not reaching or something like that. That's where you see this kind of building and thinning kind of develops with time. So, like I said, there is no virus involved in this. It's just merely because of the feeding that's happening. So some things that we notice is that we see the symptoms throughout the year, because as the feeding occurs, you start seeing the symptoms, and that is going to persist for a long period. But But the mite numbers, it's not necessary that needs to be there all the time. Based on some sampling, we know that they peak in some time in spring and kind of fall out when it's warms up. And towards the end in the fall, we see another peak. So their numbers peaks in certain weather, certain conditions that they actually with them. So that's something to keep in mind. But that doesn't mean it's not there during the winter time or in the summertime. They're there, but numbers are too low. There's that, keep that in mind when you think about spring. So maybe that, either time will be a good time to, for management standpoint. Resistance, we haven't seen a really in the results. Some studies shows that some cultivars are resistant, others shows not. So that's not one thing that we know a lot at this point. So what you can do is, one thing is moisture management. That's very important. Keep, especially in the drought period, if you know that area has some sort of mite infestation in the past, then that's there. So it's good to roll in some kind of irrigation plan. Another important thing about management here is some cultural practices that you can adopt. When you know that it's there, don't leave the clippings back in the grass. So always collect it and throw it somewhere else. And because the clippings will have mites in there, you're basically not helping. When you're mowing, you're basically re-inoculating this same grass, same field again and again. And that may not be a good thing here in this case. And by just doing that, you will have a very good control. Another aspect that you can do that's shown that has some efficacy is carving. So basically, goes with mowing, but you're mowing into it, really low height. And if you do that type of mowing and removing whatever the clippings out and taking it out of the field and dumping somewhere else, that may be the best way to reach. And that definitely reduced the richest bloom and also the mite numbers. And this is also shown in some other studies where people have done in the springtime and summertime. Okay, late springtime we're talking about, because that's the time the numbers, most probably because the number of mites is a little bit lower at that time, and that's why it's working. In the same study, this information is coming from where they did in the early spring that didn't work. In that case, you still saw richest bloom symptoms and also mite numbers. Okay. Fertilization is another thing to keep in mind, because that favor the mites. So the mite numbers go up because they get nutritious food and their number kind of booming, and you will start seeing more richest bloom symptoms. So that is another aspect to keep in mind with these mites. Ivermectin, any product that it has ivermectin and using some kind of adjuvant really worked, looks like it, based on some results. And so if you can add any adjuvant to ivermectin, it's a very mite targeted product. In the past, diazinon was used, that are also used. That is organophosphate. It also did some benefits. So this is something that keep in mind. If you combine with high fertilizer application, it's kind of working in condor, and you may not get that good results as you expect from ivermectin. Just keep in mind. But again, that is something that you need to keep in mind about the site you're trying to control. So if it is going to be a site that is very precious to you, and there aesthetics are going to be important, so you can't compromise with fertilizer in that case. So you have to come up with a balance, a middle point where you want to use this. Okay. Let me look at the time, and for the sake of time, I will stop here. Okay. And looks like there is some good questions here. And if there is any time, and we'll continue, because I don't want to be, you want to finish it by 4:00, so we can start the next session later. Okay. So I see a few questions here. 1 second. There you go. So I think this question is to Patrick. What about the question is just random asking what about torpedo grass?
So is there a specific question about torpedo grass? The question is what about torpedo, right?
Maybe management, maybe that's what your topic was, and maybe that's what it's referring to.
Let me see if there's another response to that question.
Yeah, how to control it.
How to control it. Okay, well, If you're managing Bermuda grass or zoysia grass or cool season grasses, which I think torpedo would be rare there, seashore paspalum, you can use Drive quinclorac at 3/4 of a pound active per acre, which is half a gallon per acre of the liquid Drive Accelerate product. 3 applications on a 3-week interval, more or less, will be needed to get severe torpedo grass infestations controlled to acceptable levels. When you just spray Drive once or twice, we often see that late summer or fall regrowth of torpedo grass, and it's usually going to be a multi-year program to get torpedo slowed down, contained, and then controlled to acceptable levels. Monument can also be used, trifloxysulfuron by itself or in a rotation program with Drive. So if you have sedges and Kalinga and also torpedo grass, you can rotate Monument into your program by itself or in tank mixtures with Drive can work very well. In St. Augustine grass, there is some interesting results using Recognition, which is trifloxysulfuron Monument with a safener. We can actually safe and Drive in St. Augustine grass with Recognition. This is something that's not on the label yet, but could be something worth trying out in limited areas. If you have St. Augustine grass, we can begin to fight torpedo grass much easier with Recognition by itself or with Drive in St. Augustine grass in the summertime. But as far as pre-emergence control, it's torpedo is a perennial warm season grass. It's going to reemerge from rhizomes. There will be some seed germination, but it's going to grow right through pre-emergent applications of products like Ronstar and most other chemistries that we use in turf.
Great. So Patrick, we have another question for you.
Okay.
So question goes this way. Please, how do we keep doveweed from taking over the walls?
So doveweed is a summer annual grass-like plant, and unlike other annual weeds that we have in turfgrass, it's germinating much later in the late spring and in the early summertime. Doveweed germination begins when soil temperatures reach around 85 degrees compared to crab and goosegrass that begin germination at 50 or 65 degrees. So we need to time pre-emergent treatments, products like Spectacle, Tower, Pennant Magnum, Freehand is very good. Those all can provide very effective doveweed control, but we need to make those applications in central Georgia in mid-May, more or less. And that needs to be part of a sequential program with your crabgrass herbicides like the Barricades and Dimensions and pendimethalins, rotating to some of those other chemistries later in the spring can get in front of doveweed germination. If you have some doveweed that is already established, tank mixing a Speed Zone or a Trimec product, even metsulfuron at very early stages can control doveweed that has germinated, and then having that pre-emergent herbicide can just help prevent that flush of doveweed from germinating in late springtime.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you so much, Patrick. Let's move on to an insect question. So the question goes like this: says systemic insecticide, insect control for Bermuda grass. My understanding is that systemic insecticide control for Bermuda grass mites may be more or less effective than the foliar treatment. Well, based on I haven't done personally any work on Bermuda grass using insecticide, systemic insecticide per se, but referring to some other systems where people have tried systemic insecticides, it rarely works as systemically. It mostly works as a contact. And we haven't seen any systemic or contact activity with, say, neonicotinoids or those kind of products. Mostly we see good effects with pyrethroids in John, these kind of erythroid mites. So in this case, it's going to work in the system. That's what I can say based on what we have done in the past, mostly because the way they are feeding, because they are really tiny mites, they're scraping the epidermal cells. And those insecticides, even though they're moving within the plant, they are not reaching out to the epidermal cells and they are not intoxicating or they are not feeding on those residues of the systemic insecticide. Could be one reason why this systemic insecticide is not a good way to go for these EU5 mites, like bulk might here. Okay. Let's take one last question. Okay. This is for Dr. Martinez, and this question goes like this. Did you see a lot of mini rain this fall in leaf needle greens? Still can't control it. Everything needed to have fast greens seems to make it worse.
Yes, actually, I have two questions. One is for my friend Byron Rhodes over in South Georgia, and he's asking about a fungicide for residential, the one that I did mention. Serrata is the one that is in all areas. That's a new Pythium product there that can be used in residential and many other areas. Calida has a little bit, it's not particularly for asking for residential, but it has a lot of commercial, institutional, cemeteries. So a lot of that, all other nearby areas or quasi, but not for residential. But I wanted to, the other ones that I mentioned, basically Densicore, Resilia, Acernity, Posterity, for golf courses. However, I just wanted to remind Byron that we still, these are the newest. We still have very good products on the market that are for residential. The SDA Shi's Velista, for example, that's a very good residential part. That we have Lexicon, which is a combo of the SDHI and the Strubilurin. We have a Kabuto, of course, the old ones, quotation mark, like Bannermax, Propiconazole, things like Subdue for Pythium are still available, and so on. And if you need more questions, Byron, I know you have me in your contacts, and I have you in my contacts. So for Matthew, I think we are getting very savvy at preventing mini ring. Mini ring, for some of you don't know, is a Rhizoctonia Z that we see in Bermuda, mini in ultra dwarfs. And he's completely right. Anything that we do to make green faster, like packing that thatch and sanding and so on, just make it worse because it lives right at the crown area. And I've seen when any of the thatching, the thatch procedures, if they are not implemented, and if you have it, we really have to go really aggressive with maybe two co-radiations, maybe weekly or a couple of weeks, just grooming, just getting that. And remember, the growth of the ultra dwarfs is kind of very packed and kind of to the side. So the key there will be the thatching procedures. As much as you can avoid, the rolling and packing or areas that are needed heavy machinery. And when you're going to put the fungicide product, make sure that it goes into, water it in briefly, so that it goes down into the crown area, probably a tenth of an inch that it on water, that it goes down to it. And so water volume and timing. Anytime that you see that we are getting now up to above 85 or so, you need to hit it. Before we waited, until July 4th or so, but I've seen cases in which we have reached those temperatures, in March, and therefore we will have that. So it's a very high temperature disease. So anytime that you see that you're going to hit 85 or above 80, even if it's March or February, hit it.
Thank you so much, Alfredo. Again, I would say there are more questions I see from Eugene. Eugene, please contact Patrick directly. And, I'm sure you can find his email address. And Charles, contact me. I can answer your questions. But for now, let's conclude this Turfgrass session because of sake of time. Okay. Thank you.